So this book came from Mecca? Really? Do you know anything about Mecca? We're going to show you that there's no way in the world this book could have come from that city. Why? Look at, hold on, come on board. We'll explain it.
Of course, we've been using a book by Dr. Stephen Shoemaker called Creating the Qur'an, and we covered various angles from that book. And now we're talking about a geographical location that is so important for Muslims, and that's Mecca, the origin of Islam, and in this case, the origin of the Qur'an. We did ask this question last time, and we said, what about Mecca? And we began to show quotations from Shoemaker himself and Patricia Crone and others challenging the Islamic narrative concerning Mecca itself. Today is no exception. We will continue to explore that question, which is, what about Mecca, part 2? What about Mecca?
Absolutely. Isn't it interesting that this should have been the first question that any historian asks whenever the claim came, and it's been there for 1,300 years, this claim, or I would say maybe even 1,200 years, let's give or take 100, that Mecca is where Muhammad was born. It was where he grew up. It was where he started receiving the revelations in the Hira cave right outside of Mecca. You've seen the Hira cave. It's a place that everybody loves to go to. Therefore, he started receiving it there up until 622 when he then moved to Medina. And then he started receiving for the next 10 years, the Medinan Surah is the first part of the Quran. Mecca. Obviously, Mecca is absolutely important. We know that Islam claims that it is where Adam and Eve were sent to from the very beginning. So that's the first city in history. There's nobody earlier than Adam and Eve, obviously. You can't have a city without people. And that also is where Abraham lived in chapter 21 of the Quran. It's where he went into the Kaaba and destroyed the idols, according to chapter 21. So all these claims, that he lived in 1900 BC, these claims need to be supported. And Shoemaker is asking a perfectly legitimate question. If this man Muhammad was born there, grew up there, received the Quran from there, received it for the first 12 years of his ministry from there, and then moved up from there in 622, then certainly this place must have existed. Right. Certainly it must have been pretty important. If it's from time immemorials, from the very beginning of time, absolutely, there must be references to it. Well, let's see if the Quran could have come from this one city.
Right, and these, Dr. J, these are scholars who have very good or excellent academic reputation, and they're asking a scholarly question. You have Patricia Crone, you have Dr. Shoemaker now, you have also Dr. Houghton. I mean, we're not talking just amateur scholars, and they're asking the right questions.
Absolutely. And so let's see what Shoemaker says. I love the quote that he has on page 114 of this book here. This is the book we're going through. On page 114, this is what he says. Despite the fact that we have detailed descriptions of Western and Southern Arabia from various Roman historians, including Procopius, look at his dates, 500 to 570 CE. Now, not only that, we also supposedly have references to all of Arabia from Ptolemy, Ptolemy is writing in the 2nd century AD, and he gives us all the references to all of the towns. And he even mentions Makaraba, that many Muslims have thought was Mecca. We know that has nothing to do with Mecca. We now remember the series we did using Dan Gibson's material, showing that Makaraba is actually from northern Yemen. And this is a place that is in just at the border of southern Arabia and northern Yemen. Too far south to be Mecca. It's not even the same radicals. It's not even the same consonantals references. And that's why people who don't know Arabic make this mistake. You know Arabic. You know Makaraba cannot be Mecca.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you use that word, then you can say, well, it may sound like that, but that's not how you say Mecca.
Yeah. Now, he goes on, he says that Mecca seems to have been completely unknown to the classical and late ancient world. The fact that Mecca is not named even once in any Greek or Latin or Syriac or Nabatean or Persian text. Remember, we did that. Remember when we did that and we looked at all the great civilizations, and we talked about the Nabateans in the north, and we talked about Saba in the south, and we talked about the Himyarites, and we talked about the Ethiopians and the Eritreans, and we talked about we went up to the Assyrians, and we went to the Babylonians and the Romans in the north. We went all over, surrounding what would be Mecca today, every major civilization that predated the 7th century, and we asked a simple question. Had anybody heard of this place called Mecca? None. Not one word of this place called Mecca prior to the 7th century.
Right.
So this is what Shoemaker is saying. Not one is found in any of this Greek, Latin, Syriac, Nabatean, or Persian literature. Persia, that's Iraq, that's the Sassanians. They hadn't heard about it, and they're just to the east. So these sources provide strong evidence that Mecca did not have any significant cultural, economic, or political ties to the broader world of the late ancient Mediterranean Mesopotamia.
And I want to comment on this. I mean, as a Muslim, when I grew up that way, this would have been a shocking statement to me because I've always been taught, and I know all Muslims are taught, Mecca was so significant that there is trade caravan going north and south during the fall and during the summertime. And there is a chapter in the Quran known the chapter of Quraysh that addresses this.
Absolutely. We did this earlier. We looked at all these towns that do exist in ancient literature. Remember? We talked about it. Sana'a, you can find in talks about ancient literature. Yeah, of course, Aden is well known because it's a port. You have Sana'a that is there in Yemen today. That's well known. Najran, that's just north of that. That's well known. Taif, that's just up in the mountains above Mecca, up on the plateau. Taif is well documented. Further up north of that is Yathrib. That's well documented. Further up, Khaybar is documented. Taman is documented. Petra is well documented. All these along what we know is the Western Plateau. Those are well documented.
Except Mecca.
None for Mecca.
It's amazing. You go south to Yemen, a lot of stuff documented.
Absolutely. You can see that.
So the missing link.
There's the missing link. And this is what Shoemaker is saying. You've got to have some reference to this if it's that important a city. Now let's continue with this quote. Of course, once we recognize that Mecca was nothing more than a small village with only a few hundred inhabitants and a subsistence economy, its omission becomes perfectly understandable upon an open parenthesis. Now, when you see what he's doing here, folks, and this is one of the problems I have with Shoemaker. Where did he come to the supposition there's a few hundred in Mecca? He's already assuming, he just got done saying, there's nothing there in the Hijaz, but there must have been at least a few hundred.
Well, that could have been a reliance on the standard Islamic narrative.
You see what he's doing? He's playing both sides simultaneously.
Right.
And this is what lots of scholars do. This is what I had problem with Hoyland. This is what got Patricia Kronos so angry. She would not at all say this. She would not say, listen, why are you calling, to Hoyland, why are you calling these people Muslims when in the 7th century that word didn't even exist? There were no Muslims. Call them what they say they are. Write what the text says. It doesn't say Muslim. It says Arab. It says Saracen. It says Mahajurun. It says Maghrite. It says Ishmaelite. It says Hagarin, but it does not say Muslim. She got really upset when people would do that. We need to be careful as well. I think Shoemaker needs to be careful. That he's already giving lip service. There must be a place called Mecca. It had a few hundred. How does he even know that much? No, he doesn't. He's just supposing that. You can say that about Yathrib, but you cannot say that about Mecca. Continuing on, he then talks about the sea route, and he does. This is in the same page. Concerning the trade route through Mecca, it's quite clear that the evidence at hand makes it plain that such trade route bypassed both cities on its way to the Mediterranean world. Now, what he's talking about is Patricia Krone's book, Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam, where she did 15 chapters looking at 15 different types of spices and just debunked every one of them. Not one of them went through a place called Mecca. There just was no Mecca.
And to be honest with you, hats off to her because she did it at a time that this would have been taboo to even make a reference to.
And she has been vilified for that, but God bless her because of the fact that she's had so many languages, she could incorporate the languages, go back to the original documentation, and she went to the documentation there in Ajalis, she went to the documentation there in Yemen, she went to the documentation way over there in the western coast of India, across the Arabian Sea, got the documentation because she could read the documents. Why hadn't anybody done that before? From the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way up into the 7th century, she was the first to get the documentation. And what she found is no trade. This trade was all maritime. Remember, she talked about that. It was all maritime. She just debunked Montgomery Watt's trade route theory, completely shattered it. But she didn't go far enough because she did say about the sea trade up the Red Sea. She got that part right, and Shoemaker's getting that part right. He continues. He says, moving across instead the Red Sea by ship, as Chrono in particular has painstakingly demonstrated, but both Shoemaker and Patricia Krohn didn't go far enough. What do we now know about the Red Sea? You and I did a whole segment on that. We've done study on it. We can't find any reference to anybody going on on the eastern side of the Red Sea, on the Arabian side. There are no ports there for them to refurbish. All the ports are on the western side of the Red Sea, and these ports are well known, and they can be documented all the way back to the 4th and 3rd century BC. And they all exist long, many centuries before Islam came into existence. 5 different ports. What's fascinating about it, and this is something that both Crone and Shoemaker have not really given lip service, is the port itself, that where you grew up, Jeddah, the people say, well, that would have been in existence, that would have been there. No, it wasn't. Hawting shut that down by saying that Jeddah was created to bring goods to Mecca. So Mecca was created for Hawt, then Jeddah was created as a place to then bring goods to Mecca, which would have been around the late 7th century, early 8th century. With that in mind, can you then understand why this is so devastating? If there's no place, if it doesn't even exist, how then can the Qur'an have come from this place? Obviously, it did not. I want to, in the next episode, I just want to end off with this because I want to give some more scholarship on this. What do they say about Mecca? Absolutely important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Until next episode, which is a continuation of this topic, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.